The moment his mother understood who you really are, everything changed. Listen carefully. What I am about to reveal was hidden for a long time, but not anymore. There was a precise moment, quiet yet earth-shaking, when his mother finally understood who you really are. Not who she assumed. Not who others painted you to be. But who you truly are in the spiritual realm. And the instant that realization struck her spirit, everything shifted. I speak now because this moment was not accidental. Heaven allowed her eyes to open at the exact time they needed to. You were never random in her story. You were a mirror, a trigger, and a sign she could no longer ignore. For a long time, she watched from a distance. Silently. Measuring. Comparing. She listened to the stories told about you, some true, many twisted. She believed what was convenient at first. But something kept bothering her. A pattern she couldn't shake. Every time your name came up, the atmosphere changed. Every time your presence entered a room, spoken or unspoken, something shifted inside her chest. She tried to dismiss it. But the truth has weight. And weight always presses through denial. The moment came when she noticed what always happened after you were mentioned. People grew uncomfortable. Energy shifted. Masks slipped. That's when her spirit leaned forward. She realized you weren't the problem. You were the exposure. You see, some people carry light so strong that it rearranges rooms without trying. Your silence speaks louder than accusations. Your restraint convicts more than confrontation. And when she finally connected the dots, when she understood that chaos followed not because of you, but because of what you reveal, her perception cracked wide open. That realization frightened her. Because once a mother sees clearly, she also sees what her child has been hiding. She saw the imbalance. She saw the jealousy. She saw the insecurity that flared every time you stood calm, chosen, unmoved. And for the first time, she asked herself a question that changed everything. Who is this person, really? At that moment, heaven leaned in. You must understand, this wasn't about admiration. It was recognition. Spiritual recognition. She sensed authority on you that couldn't be explained by background, status, or effort. A covering. A protection. A quiet favor that followed you even through storms meant to drown you. And that terrified her more than hatred ever could. Because if you are protected, then those who tried to undermine you were never safe. She replayed memories. Conversations. Reactions. Moments where her child reacted too strongly to you. Moments where lies were told too easily. Moments where you were blamed, but somehow always emerged untouched. That's when the truth landed heavy. You were never competing. You were appointed. And the instant she understood that, her behavior changed. Not loudly. Not publicly. But internally, something broke, and something else woke up. She began watching differently. Listening differently. Measuring words more carefully around you. Because once someone realizes you carry divine backing, they know this. Mistreating you comes with consequences. If this message is reaching you, it is because heaven wants you to know, you did nothing to force this revelation. You didn't need to defend yourself. You didn't need to explain your heart. God handled it in silence. And what shifted in her spirit has already begun to ripple outward. Stay with me. Because what she realized next, about why you were placed near her child, will shock you even more. What she realized next unsettled her far more than the first revelation. Because once her eyes opened to who you are, she could no longer ignore why you were placed there. And I tell you this plainly, your presence was never accidental. Heaven positioned you like a silent test. Not to punish, but to reveal. And when she finally understood this, her spirit grew uneasy. She began to see a pattern she had once refused to acknowledge. Every season you entered, her child changed. Not improved, exposed. Confidence turned into defensiveness. Charm slipped into manipulation. Certainty crumbled into comparison. She noticed how your calm irritated something unresolved. How your restraint provoked reactions that never matched the moment. How your name alone stirred emotional storms that had nothing to do with you. That's when the truth pressed in hard. You were not the threat. You were the mirror. And mirrors are dangerous to those who avoid self-examination. She replayed moments where her child spoke about you with forced indifference. Moments where laughter came too quickly, where explanations felt rehearsed. She remembered how often your intentions were questioned, without evidence. How quickly blame was assigned, without logic. And suddenly, the question shifted. Not, what is wrong with you? But, what is this revealing about my child? That realization pierced her deeper than anger ever could. She recognized that you carry a kind of authority that doesn't announce itself. You don't chase validation. You don't explain your worth. You move with quiet certainty, and that unsettles insecure foundations. Your energy didn't compete. It confronted. Not with words, but with presence. She understood then that God often places people like you near others not to destroy them, but to invite growth. Yet not everyone chooses growth. Some choose resentment. Some choose resistance. And some choose deception. Her heart grew heavy when she realized which path her child had taken. Because now she could see it clearly, the subtle attempts to undermine you, the small distortions of truth, the strategic positioning to look superior while feeling inferior inside. She saw how often you were made the subject of stories that painted you as the problem, when in reality, you were the standard they feared they couldn't meet. And once a mother sees that, she cannot unsee it. This is why her behavior shifted. She grew quieter around you. More observant. Less reactive. Because deep down, she sensed something spiritual at work. She felt the boundary around you, the protection she could not cross. She realized that speaking against you felt risky. Not socially. Spiritually. She didn't have language for it, but her soul knew. You are watched over. And when she recognized that, fear mixed with respect. Not admiration, discernment. The kind that causes someone to weigh their words twice before speaking your name. She began noticing something else too. Every attempt to discredit you failed. Every plan to sideline you stalled. Every narrative meant to weaken you somehow strengthened you instead. That's when the final understanding began to form. You were never meant to stay small in their story. You were sent as a turning point. And here is the part heaven wants you to hear clearly: you were not placed there for their comfort. You were placed there for alignment. And when alignment is resisted, exposure follows. That's why things changed. Conversations shifted. Energy tightened. Eyes lingered longer than before. She started watching you, not with suspicion, but with caution. Because now she knew, the way someone treats you determines whether God moves toward them or away. Remain still. Remain guarded. Remain exactly who you are. Because what she is beginning to realize now, about what happens next if her child continues on this path, will leave no room for denial. And when that moment arrives, the consequences will not be quiet. Now listen closely, because this is where the weight of heaven presses in. After her realization settled, after the patterns became impossible to deny, a deeper fear entered her heart, not panic, but knowing. The kind that keeps someone awake at night, replaying conversations they once dismissed. She began sensing that this was no longer just emotional, it was spiritual. She understood that a line had been crossed long before she ever admitted it. She started to recognize the spiritual law at work. Every time her child moved against you, subtly, strategically, or silently, something in their own life faltered. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But consistently. Delays appeared. Opportunities slipped. Restlessness grew. Joy thinned out. She noticed how nothing seemed to settle anymore. And that's when the truth became undeniable. You are protected by a higher order. Not because you are perfect. Not because you are loud. But because your heart posture aligns with heaven. You didn't have to curse anyone. You didn't have to fight back. God Himself stood as your defender, and she could feel it. There is a difference between coincidence and consequence, and she finally discerned it. She remembered moments when her child mocked your silence. Moments when they underestimated your restraint. Moments when they mistook your peace for weakness. And now she saw the irony. You weren't silent because you lacked power. You were silent because you didn't need to prove it. That realization shook her deeply. She began observing how people responded to you when you weren't trying. How strangers respected you without knowing why. How truth gravitated toward you. How lies dissolved in your presence. And then she understood something most people never do. Your authority is not social. It is spiritual. You walk with an unseen backing that disrupts dishonest systems. And anyone operating from manipulation feels threatened by that, even if they don't understand why. This is why her child became increasingly reactive. Your stillness made them restless. Your clarity made them defensive. Your growth made them desperate. She saw how comparison consumed them. How your progress, spoken or unspoken, felt like judgment to someone already insecure. And for the first time, she didn't rush to excuse it. She questioned it. She asked herself where that insecurity came from. Where that bitterness took root. And the answer unsettled her more than she expected. Because it wasn't about you at all. It was about identity. Your presence triggered a confrontation they had been avoiding with themselves. You didn't accuse them, but your existence asked questions they didn't want to answer. Who am I really? Why does this bother me so much? Why can't I celebrate them? And when those questions went unanswered, resentment filled the gap. She recognized then that you had become a spiritual crossroads. One path led to growth and humility. The other led to pride and resistance. And her child had chosen poorly. This is why her tone shifted. She stopped defending behavior she could no longer justify. She stopped participating in narratives that didn't align with truth. She stopped encouraging comparisons that were destroying peace. Not because she suddenly sided with you, but because she feared the consequences of ignoring God. She felt the warning. When someone is divinely shielded, opposing them doesn't just fail, it rebounds. And she could feel the tension building. Like a storm waiting for the right conditions. She knew something was coming. A moment when pretending would no longer work. A moment when the imbalance would be corrected, one way or another. That's when she realized something crucial about you. You are not here to chase validation. You are here to complete assignment. And assignments don't negotiate with insecurity. This is why heaven is telling you now, do not shrink. Do not soften your boundaries. Do not dim what God placed inside you to make others comfortable. You were never sent to be understood by everyone. You were sent to be aligned. And alignment always forces a reckoning. If this message is stirring something in your spirit, it's because confirmation is landing. You are not imagining the shift. You are not misreading the silence. You are not wrong for feeling watched more closely now. They feel it too. And what she is beginning to sense next, about the inevitability of divine correction, and the moment when truth can no longer be delayed, will change the entire dynamic permanently. Because when God decides to move openly, no one remains neutral. Now the atmosphere tightens, because this is the stage where heaven no longer whispers. After everything she noticed, after the patterns, the delays, the unrest, she began to sense pressure. Not from people. From God. A divine tension that settles when truth has been delayed too long. And hear this clearly, there comes a moment when awareness becomes responsibility. And she crossed into that moment. She could no longer pretend she didn't see it. The favoritism she once excused now felt dangerous. The silence she once kept now felt complicit. The protection she once offered blindly now felt misplaced. She realized something sobering. By ignoring the truth, she was standing in the way of correction. And heaven does not tolerate obstruction for long. She began noticing signs, not dramatic, but precise. Conversations that stopped mid-sentence. Plans that unraveled without explanation. Confidence in her child that once felt inflated now felt fragile. The bravado cracked. The certainty wavered. And she knew. This was not coincidence. This was mercy running out. Because God always warns before He acts. She sensed that her child was standing on unstable ground, ground weakened by pride, by deception, by refusal to humble themselves. And she also sensed that you were not on that ground at all. You were standing elsewhere. Elevated. Covered. This terrified her. Because now she understood the imbalance of power. Not emotional power. Spiritual authority. And she knew that when correction comes, it does not ask permission from family ties. Truth outranks blood. She became careful, not out of strategy, but out of fear of misalignment. She measured her words when your name surfaced. She avoided fueling narratives she once entertained. She even began pulling back emotionally, unsure of which side she was standing on anymore. And that uncertainty spoke louder than any apology could. You must understand, This is what happens when God begins to separate roles. When He draws lines that cannot be blurred. When He decides who is protected and who must be confronted. She sensed that she could no longer shield her child from consequences. And this is where the shift becomes irreversible. Because once a parent realizes that defending the wrong behavior places them in opposition to God, something breaks. The instinct to protect clashes with the fear of judgment. And fear always bows to authority. She started watching you differently. Not just observing, but discerning. She noticed your restraint under pressure. Your dignity in silence. Your refusal to retaliate even when provoked. And something settled in her spirit. You were not reacting because you didn't need to. You already knew God was handling it. This realization humbled her in a way she did not expect. Because she recognized that you were operating from trust, while her child was operating from fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing control. Fear of no longer being able to manipulate the narrative. And fear always reveals itself. It leaks through tone. It sharpens words. It accelerates behavior. She saw the desperation growing. Attempts to regain dominance. Subtle digs masked as jokes. Unnecessary competition. And she knew this was the final phase before collapse. Not destruction. Exposure. Because when God exposes, He does it cleanly. Precisely. Without chaos. He simply removes the covering, and lets truth stand on its own. This is why heaven is speaking to you now. Do not interfere. Do not rescue. Do not explain what God is revealing. Your stillness is part of the process. You are not being passive, you are being positioned. There is a moment approaching when truth will surface without your involvement. When words spoken in secret will return to the surface. When intentions long hidden will be unmistakable. And when that happens, she will fully understand something she is only beginning to grasp now. You were never the threat. You were the warning. A warning that humility was required. A warning that alignment mattered. A warning that God was watching closely. And if this message is resonating deeply, it's because your spirit recognizes the timing. The pressure you feel is not danger, it's anticipation. Because what unfolds next will not only correct the situation, it will permanently reposition you. And when that moment arrives, the question will no longer be who was right or wrong, but who God chose to stand with when everything came into the light. Now hear this with full attention, because this is the moment heaven seals what has already been decided. What unfolds next does not begin with noise. It begins with alignment. Quiet, unmistakable alignment. The kind that rearranges authority without asking permission, and I speak with final clarity now. What she understood about you has already altered the spiritual order of this situation. Even if no one has spoken it aloud, the verdict has been rendered. She knows. She knows that continuing to stand against you, directly or indirectly, would place her in opposition to God Himself. And that knowledge weighs heavier than loyalty, heavier than pride, heavier than denial. This is why her energy feels conflicted now. You may notice hesitation where there was once certainty, distance where there was once interference, silence where there was once control. This is not confusion. This is restraint. Because she senses that the season of covering is ending. Not because God is cruel, but because God is just. Her child has been given time, repeated chances, gentle warnings disguised as delays, invitations to humble themselves that went unanswered. And heaven does not chase forever. Correction is coming. Not explosive, not dramatic, but undeniable. It will arrive through truth, spoken or revealed, without your involvement. Conversations will surface. Motives will be exposed. Patterns will be recognized by others who once believed the narrative without question. And when that happens, something irreversible occurs. Your position elevates without effort. You are not lifted by applause, you are lifted by alignment. People will begin to see what she saw. Not all at once, but clearly. Respect will return from unexpected places. Validation will arrive without you seeking it. And those who once dismissed you will quietly recalibrate their tone. Because authority recognizes authority. This is why heaven has instructed you to remain still. Do not rush ahead of God. Do not explain what He is revealing. Do not soften the truth to protect egos that refused humility. Your obedience in silence has been noted. Your restraint under pressure has been recorded. Your refusal to retaliate has strengthened your covering. And now, promotion follows. Not promotion in the way the world measures it, but positioning, influence, spiritual weight. The kind that causes doors to open without force and opposition to dissolve without confrontation. She will watch this happen. And in that moment, her understanding will deepen into something heavier than realization, acceptance. Acceptance that you were never meant to be beneath anyone in this story. Acceptance that you were not sent to compete, but to rise. Acceptance that God chose you not because you were loud, but because you were aligned. Her child will feel the shift too. And this is where the final separation occurs. Not relational, but spiritual. Some will adjust and grow. Some will resist and fall back. Some will attempt reconciliation too late. But you are not required to chase closure. God is closing this chapter cleanly. The weight you carried that was never yours, lifted. The tension you endured without explanation, released. The confusion that lingered, resolved. And what replaces it is clarity. You will know when the moment arrives, not because someone announces it, but because peace settles where anxiety once lived. That is your confirmation. Before I withdraw, hear this final instruction from heaven. Stand firm. Stay humble. Remain unmoved. Do not doubt what God has revealed in silence. Do not second guess what He has confirmed in your spirit. You were seen. You were defended. You were chosen. And what happens next, what unfolds in the aftermath of this revelation, will not only vindicate you, but reposition you in ways you did not expect. Watch carefully. Because the same eyes that once watched you with suspicion will soon watch you with understanding. And when that happens, the truth they finally accept will change far more than they ever intended.